We call it the Bible's greatest romance. Jacob labored 14 agonizing years for his beloved Rachel. Yet, history hides a shocking twist beneath the sands of time. When Jacob finally died, he made a startling demand. He refused to be buried beside his beautiful Rachel. Instead, he chose eternal rest beside Leah, the unloved wife. Why would a man abandon his soulmate in death? The answer lies in a bitter rivalry that birthed a nation. This is not a simple fairy tale romance. This is a dark saga of deception, desperate longing, and brutal ancient customs. It is the story of two sisters trapped in a relentless war for one man. Before we uncover the truth, we must travel back to the scorching hills of Paddan-Aram. It was a harsh world governed by strict tribal laws and survival. Our story begins with a desperate fugitive. Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, was fleeing for his life. He had just stolen his older brother's sacred birthright through treachery. Now, Jacob was a hunted man in his 70s. Ancient Near Eastern life expectancies made this an advanced age to start a family. But destiny moves at its own pace. Seeking refuge, Jacob journeyed toward the city of Haran. He approached a communal well covered by a massive stone. 3 flocks of sheep rested nearby in the dust. In the arid lands of antiquity, wells were vital lifelines. They were also the traditional gathering places for nomadic tribes to socialize, trade news, and arrange crucial marriages. Jacob approached the waiting shepherds and asked about Laban, his uncle. The shepherds pointed toward the horizon. They announced that Laban's daughter was approaching with her father's flock. Jacob turned and watched her walk toward the well. Her name was Rachel. The ancient texts describe her as possessing striking form and stunning, undeniable physical beauty. In a patriarchal society where women were often veiled and hidden, female shepherds were rare. Rachel's role suggested a wealthy household that still relied on family labor. When Jacob saw Rachel, a profound emotion overwhelmed him. Driven by sudden passion, he stepped forward and single-handedly rolled the massive stone away from the well's heavy opening. This was a feat of incredible, almost supernatural strength. Typically, it required several men to move the stone. Jacob wanted to water her flock and prove his worth. Overcome with relief and intense emotion, Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. He revealed his true identity as her own blood relative, the son of her Aunt Rebekah. Rachel immediately ran back to inform her powerful father. Hearing that his wealthy sister's son had arrived, Laban sprinted to the well to warmly embrace the weary traveler. Laban welcomed Jacob into his bustling household. It was here that Jacob formally met Leah, Rachel's older sister. The biblical narrative draws a sharp, painful contrast between them. Scripture notes that Leah had weak or tender eyes. Scholars debate if this meant a physical defect or simply eyes lacking the bright, youthful sparkle of her sister. Regardless of the exact translation, the cultural implication is devastatingly clear. Leah lacked the outward allure that captivated men in the ancient world. Rachel was the undisputed prize. Leah learned very early the painful reality of being second best. Even as the firstborn, she existed entirely within the overwhelming shadow of her sister's captivating grace. After Jacob worked for a month, Laban made a calculated business proposition. He asked Jacob to name his wages. Jacob, completely blinded by love, made a staggering offer. "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel," he declared. In the ancient Near East, a groom typically paid a mohar, or heavy bride price. Because Jacob had fled empty-handed, he offered his own sweat and blood as payment. 7 years of brutal, back-breaking agricultural labor beneath the unforgiving Mesopotamian sun was monumental. He endured freezing desert nights, violent sandstorms, and dangerous predators. Yet, the scriptures record a beautiful truth. Those 7 agonizing years felt like merely a few fleeting days. His intense love for Rachel made the unbearable labor feel completely insignificant. Finally, they agreed. Upon time passed, Jacob approached Laban and demanded his rightful bride to be delivered. Laban threw a lavish multi-day wedding feast for the entire community. The wine flowed freely as the darkness of the desert night descended over the massive nomadic camp. Ancient Mesopotamian brides were heavily veiled during the wedding rituals. The consummation always took place in the pitch black darkness of the bridal tent, making deception frighteningly easy. Laban enacted a cruel, calculated scheme. Instead of sending Rachel, he sent his older daughter, Leah, into the dark tent. Jacob, perhaps inebriated, unknowingly consummated the wrong marriage. Imagine the psychological torment Leah endured that night. She lay beside a man who had sacrificed 7 years for her sister, knowing he believed she was someone else. Was she an active, willing participant in this grand deception? Or was she simply an obedient ancient daughter, forced to comply with her father's strict patriarchal authority? When the harsh morning light finally pierced the tent, Jacob saw the horrifying truth. The woman lying beside him was not his beloved Rachel. It was the unloved Leah. Furious, Jacob stormed out to confront his deceitful uncle. "Why have you betrayed me?" he screamed. "Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why have you deceived me?" Laban offered a chillingly calm, culturally validated excuse. "It is not our custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one," he smugly replied. The irony was sharp and bitter. Jacob, whose name literally meant deceiver, had tricked his own blind father. Now, the master manipulator had been thoroughly outplayed by Laban. Laban offered a brutal compromise: finish Leah's mandatory 7-day bridal week. Then he would give Jacob Rachel as a second wife in exchange for another 7 years' labor. Any rational man would have walked away from this toxic family, but Jacob was helplessly bound by his deep affection. He accepted the crushing terms without hesitation. After Leah's bridal week ended, Jacob finally married Rachel. The text states a painful reality. He loved Rachel far more than Leah, establishing a toxic, divided household forever. Imagine this deeply fractured household. 2 sisters share one husband within the exact same nomadic camp. One is fiercely adored, while the other is barely tolerated every day. The ancient texts never soften this cruel reality. Jacob openly loved Rachel far more than Leah. It was a daily public humiliation for the older, discarded sister. But the biblical narrative introduces a divine twist. When the Lord saw Leah was utterly unloved and rejected, he miraculously intervened and opened her barren womb immediately. Leah conceived and gave birth to her firstborn son. She named him Reuben, which means sea, a son, desperately hoping this boy would finally capture Jacob's heart. But Jacob's affection remained entirely with Rachel, so Leah conceived again, bearing Simeon, meaning heard. She believed God heard her painful cries of absolute marital neglect. A third son followed, named Levi, meaning attached. Leah tragically reasoned that producing 3 male heirs would permanently secure her husband's deep, unwavering attachment and love. It never happened, but with her 4th son, Judah, meaning praise, a profound shift occurred. Leah stopped chasing a man's conditional affection and began praising God instead. This was a monumental turning point in biblical history. From this overlooked, rejected wife's lineage would eventually descend the great King David and the promised Messiah. Meanwhile, Rachel watched her older sister build a nursery, despite possessing Jacob's intense love and striking beauty. Rachel suffered the ultimate ancient disgrace. Her womb was closed. In the ancient Near East, a woman's entire social worth was intrinsically tied to bearing male heirs. Rachel's barrenness was a devastating public humiliation she could not escape. Consumed by furious envy and overwhelming despair, Rachel confronted Jacob. "Give me children or else I die," she screamed, capturing the agonizing desperation of her tragic situation. Jacob reacted with intense anger, angrily refusing to take the blame. He sharply reminded his favorite wife that only God held ultimate power over life and fertility. Driven by cultural precedent, Rachel utilized an ancient Mesopotamian legal custom. She offered her personal handmaid, Bilhah, to act as a surrogate mother bearing Jacob's children. Bilhah conceived and bore 2 sons upon Rachel's knees, claiming them legally. Rachel triumphantly named them Dan and Naphtali, declaring she had victoriously wrestled her sister. The fierce marital rivalry rapidly escalated. Seeing she had temporarily stopped bearing children, Leah retaliated by offering her own servant, Zilpah, to Jacob as another wife. Zilpah bore 2 more sons for Leah's growing camp, named Gad and Asher. Leah proudly proclaimed her great fortune, believing all daughters would now call her blessed. During the wheat harvest, Reuben discovered wild mandrakes in the field. In ancient botanical lore, these roots were highly prized as potent aphrodisiacs and powerful fertility treatments. He brought these rare plants to his mother, Leah. When the desperate Rachel saw them, she immediately begged her sister to hand over the magical fertility roots. Leah erupted with years of buried, agonizing bitterness. She angrily asked if stealing her husband's love wasn't enough, without also trying to steal her son's precious mandrakes. Rachel proposed a humiliating, transactional bargain. She traded a single night of marital intimacy with Jacob in exchange for the supposed magical powers of the mandrake roots. When Jacob returned from the dusty fields, Leah boldly intercepted him. She informed her husband he was essentially rented for the night using her son's harvested plants. Consider the sheer tragedy of this deeply broken dynamic. A woman forced to barter with her sister for basic physical intimacy from her own legally wedded husband. God again blessed the rejected Leah. She conceived and bore 2 more sons, Issachar and Zebulun, alongside a daughter named Dinah, solidifying her massive familial legacy. Finally, after years of agonizing silence and bitter tears, God remembered Rachel. He miraculously opened her womb, ending her long public disgrace and overwhelming personal sorrow. Rachel gave birth to a son, naming him Joseph, which literally means God will add. She fervently prayed the Lord would quickly bless her with another child. This incredibly chaotic household of 2 warring sisters and 2 servant women produced 12 sons. These men would eventually establish the foundational tribes of ancient Israel. From the unloved Leah came Judah, establishing the royal lineage of future kings. From the favored Rachel came Joseph, the visionary who would save them from starvation. Their ancient struggle feels painfully relevant today. We still constantly fight silent battles of comparison, desperately measuring our personal worth by external validation and societal favoritism. We gaze upon modern Rachels, envying their seemingly perfect, beautiful lives. Yet, we remain entirely blind to the hidden anguish and desperate prayers, whispered in their darkness. Meanwhile, countless modern Leahs walk among us. They feel chronically overlooked, unchosen, and entirely invisible, wondering why they never seem to win the ultimate earthly prizes. Scripture reveals a profound, comforting reality. The divine perspective completely ignores human metrics of success. God specifically sees, hears, and chooses those whom society quickly discards. The only escape from this toxic cycle of comparison is Leah's ultimate realization. We must stop demanding worldly validation and start recognizing the divine grace already present. Jacob's family was a deeply dysfunctional, fractured mess. Yet, God utilized this exact brokenness to meticulously weave the incredibly complex foundation of his chosen, eternal nation. This ancient text also serves as a stark warning. Jacob's blatant favoritism bred generational resentment, eventually leading to his favorite son being violently sold into brutal slavery. Finally, this is a profound story about waiting. Jacob waited 14 years for a wife. Rachel waited decades for a child. Leah waited a lifetime for love. In our culture of instant gratification, waiting feels like an unbearable punishment. Yet, the biblical narrative insists that enduring delayed gratification often produces history's greatest spiritual miracles. The story of Rachel and Leah is not a traditional fairy tale featuring flawless romance. Instead, it is a brutally honest, historically grounded narrative about deeply flawed people. This ancient Mesopotamian account forces us to confront uncomfortable realities. It highlights the devastating consequences of patriarchal customs, marital deception, and the toxic nature of blatant family favoritism. Yet, this intense historical realism is precisely what offers us genuine hope today. The biblical authors deliberately refuse to sanitize the profound messiness of these ancient founding patriarchs. If the divine could utilize a deceitful father, a blatantly biased husband, and two warring sisters to build a nation, he can certainly redeem our modern daily brokenness. Consider the final legacy of this incredibly dysfunctional household. These 12 sons, born from fierce rivalry and desperate bargaining, ultimately formed the 12 distinct tribes of ancient Israel. Through the unloved, rejected Leah came the great King David. From her royal lineage eventually descended Jesus Christ, the ultimate symbol of divine redemption and profound, unconditional love. Through the deeply favored but tragically barren Rachel came Joseph. He became the brilliant Egyptian vizier who ultimately saved the entire Mediterranean world from a devastating ancient famine. Both of these historically significant sisters, despite their relentless personal rivalry and profound individual suffering, remained absolutely central to the unfolding drama of early biblical redemption and history. Today, we inhabit a world obsessed with carefully curated digital perfection. We constantly measure our fundamental human worth through social media engagement, public validation, and endless horizontal comparison. We deeply fear that our personal brokenness disqualifies us from greatness. We incorrectly believe that a messy past or a complicated family dynamic renders us completely permanently useless. But the sands of ancient Haran tell a profoundly different story. Your modern family does not require flawless perfection for a higher divine purpose to beautifully work through it. Your complicated past does not require immediate sanitization for true redemption. Your fractured, difficult relationships do not have to be entirely simple for profound spiritual growth to actively occur. Perhaps you currently feel exactly like the ancient, unloved Leah. You feel perpetually overlooked, painfully unchosen, and completely overwhelmed by the constant, agonizing sting of being a second choice. Rest assured that the divine sees your quiet, hidden pain. Just as God heard Leah's desperate cries from her dark tent, He acknowledges your profound, unseen daily suffering today. Or perhaps you silently resonate with the beautifully favored Rachel. From the outside, your life appears perfectly constructed, yet internally, you actively wrestle with agonizing, profound, hidden emptiness. God meticulously observes the hidden battles you secretly fight behind closed doors. He is actively writing a comprehensive, redemptive story that is significantly greater than your current emotional pain. Centuries ago, beneath the scorching Mesopotamian sun, God forever changed the course of human history through the chaotic, painful lives of two desperately imperfect, rival ancient biblical sisters. He transformed their bitter tears, transactional marriages, and desperate longing into the very foundation of His promised people. He built an eternal legacy from their painfully shattered, broken dreams. As we close this chapter of ancient history, remember their profound legacy. Stop violently competing for temporary earthly validation and actively begin embracing the unconditional grace already provided today. Thank you for journeying through this ancient biblical history with us. If this historical deep dive powerfully resonated with you, please consider supporting our ongoing media documentary mission today.